Hello everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, quarter of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the Monday edition of my bi-weekly behind-the-scenes DM-only live stream Crafting Icewind out, which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Rime of the Frostmaiden. If you are playing characters of Robin, Frey, Celeste, Edmund, or Thimbleweed, this is not the right stream for you, but for the rest of you, welcome. Assuming you like spoilers, we stream our D&D sessions live on YouTube every Friday. Watch all of our D&D sessions and reviews here on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at RogueWatson and join our official Discord server with invite link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. For our campaign, we use Roll20, and for streaming, I use Open Broadcaster software with Streamlabs. Happy New Year's! Hope everyone had an awesome holiday. I took the entire week off from streaming, so that was unusual for me. I actually got a pretty big break, and then of course we didn't even do Rime the week before. It was our holiday one-shot, so it has been a hot minute since I have been doing the Rime of the Frostmaiden, even thought about Rime of the Frostmaiden. In fact, I have been halfway through reading Dragonlance. It's been pretty good so far, but more on that later. We are back in Rime of the Frostmaiden. We have still got a pretty good amount of this campaign left, I think. I mean, we are maybe now a fourth of the way through the Caves of Hunger. What do we think? Maybe a third. We've done the north part, which everybody kind of has to do. We haven't gone down to the Rimmer's Nest yet, which there's honestly a slight chance my players may entirely skip it. That'll be really interesting. It's kind of like an optional boss battle right in the middle of the Mixmaster Highway here. We ended things at a pretty big cliffhanger where Frey got to transform into her Wendigo form, and then there's also this big wraith monster, so kind of a little cool mini fight here. And then I may even have the vampire come jack with him if this fight ends up, depending on how this fight goes. Or may have the vampire jack with them anyway, because, you know, presumably they'll want to still go deal with this vampire threat over here. That'll be a good reminder, because, again, we haven't done this in, like, gosh, it's been 3 weeks, right? I mean, it'll be 3 weeks since I think we played Rime. Yeah, all the streams dry up. Well, we all have to take some holidays. Yes, I just saw that, Jason. And I also need some distraction, because it's, gosh, the age of social media, it becomes almost like addiction kind of mentality, like where some traumatic thing happens, you know, somewhere in the world or somewhere, and you have to know more about it, right? So you just have to get on the feed and discover more about it. And that was a pretty scary situation. I wasn't actually watching Monday Night Football. I usually do, and in fact this was a pretty big game, even though I'm not as familiar with the AFC, but I actually was not watching the game, but I just got the alert on my phone that had happened, and then I started, of course, again, like I just said, you know, you're like, oh, what's going on? You start digging in, and unfortunately, you get information through social media that way, so it gets a lot of, it's probably not the best way to get information, and it's a lot of information all at once, and it was a very scary thing, and I think they still haven't actually updated us on how that poor player's doing, but I believe they officially postponed the game, which is a pretty big deal. Yeah, to where they had to bring out like ambulance and perform CPR on the field. I don't think that's ever been done before that I know of. Like, that's really fucking terrible. So yeah, that really sucks, and I'm glad they at least decided not to go ahead with that game, because I can imagine trying to be in the right mind frame after something like that happens. Like, you just have to be able to take some time to process that, and hopefully everything's gonna be okay there, because good lord. Rime of the Frostmaiden. What we could do is... My music still in? Oh my gosh, it still is. Ah! You see? I haven't done this in a while. You got to hear the extended cut. You did. Thankfully I've got the tab open, and I'm not wearing headphones. I don't usually hear that. Thank you for telling me. That is proof positive that I have not been streaming in a while. I'm rusty. Gonna get back on that bicycle. We could keep talking about Rime of the Frostmaiden, or we could skip ahead and actually talk a little bit about Ithran, because I kind of feel like in some ways I'm kind of ahead of things, because I feel like also during the break I had some extra crafting episodes and I think I was able to kind of plan out a little bit more of the rooms. And a lot of what I'm doing is kind of trimming this dungeon, honestly. This dungeon is... I like big dungeons, and I cannot lie, but it's kind of too big, and it's late in the campaign, and I've mentioned this before. The weird thing about this big dungeon is there's not even... the goal is just to get through it, you know? It's not like they're trying to explore it to find a certain thing. They're literally just trying to find the path through this area. So I'm okay with trimming a lot of the kind of dead ends and the things that just make you go off, which is, you know, I trimmed like H18. They don't need to do that. That's just going to be a blocker right there. You can't tell it, but I just blocked it with dynamic lighting. In fact, I'm going to use what I did down here, which is just a fucking rock here. That seems to be the easy thing to do. Is that actually on the map layer? I think it is. Put that as just a rock, and that'll kind of remind everybody. There we go. That area, and I have to zoom out to 50% to really like even make this map work for me. There we go. That's just a rock blocking the path. That's the DM saying, don't go this way. Same thing with here. I'm just going to block off his actual like frozen crypt thing, and then that frozen giant. I'm just going to get rid of that. I blocked it off and put the crypt in H19. We just don't need to have all those extra rooms and things. I don't know if I'm going to block off any other areas from there, but presumably they take care of that and the vampire. I mean, that could be 2 sessions. Like, I could really get ahead of things. You know, because combat takes a while, especially in this level, so we could easily get, you know, this could take a good chunk of it, and then if we do the vampire thing, like, all these encounters together could be possibly even 2 full sessions. The Remoraz is definitely going to be a session if we go in there, and then we've got, you know, presumably this right side / lower right side, so my goodness, we could still be in the Caves of Hunger for another month. Whereas I'm looking at it going, I don't need a month, you know, to just plan out this stuff. And a lot, you know, just because combat takes a while, so that's helpful. And it's one reason why I love doing dungeon crawls, because it allows me to really get ahead of things, because I've already got the map. You know, I don't have to make all these bespoke maps for every single encounter like you do for a travel thing, which is, for example, what I had to do for a lot of my Patreon D&D game right now, the chapter we're in Empire of the Ghouls, which I won't spoil things because I know some of you are in here. It's been a lot of traveling, and I've had to create a lot of, you know, individual encounter maps and tokens and things to do all those encounters, versus the lovely dungeons, which have, you know, it's just room to room and everything's already set up there, and it just translates so much better on a, not only in D&D, but on a virtual tabletop as well. Because I think we already went over, like, the thing in the ice. I thought that was pretty cool, and yeah, I figured out how I screwed that up, which was... need to be on the dynamic lighting layer for the windows and things to work, which is a cool effect. Place window. Place it there, and then you just drag it. I think I mentioned trying to block this off and then opening it up when people get close. I think that would be pretty effective. Click on it, you can click that, and now it's closed. Let's see how that looks. I played around with it with another module, and it looked really cool. I did get to see a lot of my friends, by the way, over the holidays, which was really neat. Mainly on New Year's Day. Okay, that's not working. What am I doing wrong here that it's not? Does window ever? I guess window's always open then, right? I guess I need to actually make it a door. Door would technically close it. So a window would just stop the player from moving across it. Let's try a door. Maybe door is what I actually need. Place a door. There we go. That's actually going to be a blocker. Okay. But you like that it blocks in real time. Yeah. There we go. Okay. And then, oh, there, see, that's cool. So open, close, you can see how it opens and closes the dynamic lighting. Boom. And that was my goal for this particular room, so that they can get close. I can kind of describe the feeling they get with this little iciness over here wall. And then as soon as, really, they just have to get within 20 feet, I think, for the actual effect to go off. I'm talking about the H31 thing on the ice, by the way. Yeah, 20 feet of the ice targeted by Dominate Monster. I think we can do more than just probe mines. And really play around with that effect maybe a little bit more. I can come up with some more interesting things to happen rather than somebody just standing still for an hour while everybody else just kind of is like, what's going on? Creature remains under the spell's effect for the full duration. Must make a DC 15 intelligence save at the end of the hour. I would change that to make it a little more exciting and say dominate monster, which means what? They just get to straight up control you. Armed by you. You have a telepathic link with it as long as two of you are on the same plane. This needs something link to issue commands to the creature while you are conscious, which it does its best to obey. And what I could do is, because it's such an alien creature, it could be trying to give you the commands, and then maybe so first you make a save to see whether it can dominate you, then you maybe make another save to see if you're able to even understand its, like, you know, eldritch interdimensional language. And if you can, and this could be an interesting second save, maybe of a different kind, like the first is wisdom and the second, in fact I think it says, yeah, intelligence. Maybe on that one, if you make the save, then you're controlled by the monster briefly, so you have to like attack somebody or something. But if you fail, then you just sit there like kind of blubbering and you end up taking psychic damage instead. So that could be an interesting effect that would scale up nicely with the players, with a little bit more danger involved. Intelligence saving throw. Yeah, I like that. Which I'm not going to count for an hour because that's not going to be very exciting. You need that to be like right then in the moment. Basically, it's essentially part of combat. Can control you directly, or you take psychic damage, basically. And maybe the madness, we can see. That one's long-term madness. That one's bad news. The only thing I hate about this table is the one that you can fall unconscious for hours. That's just bullshit. I've mentioned that before, but that's bullshit. I could just use my custom cave madness table, because I have built that one for whenever they are affected by the psychic hauntings, which are going to be in some of these areas. I don't remember what we did last time, which was down here in this area. So let's say, you know, they do the vampire, which, well, we can talk about the vampire area too, actually. The ice mirrored cavern. This would be a great place for psychic hauntings. It's got all these cool, creepy mirrors. 34 could just be empty. 35 has a slab, which I did put on there, and I thought that'd be funny because they had a slab before that was like a little tour of Ethern thing, and now this one happens to be a spitting mimic. I believe it's just a stronger version of a mimic. That can spit acid, which is pretty fun. 85 hit points is pretty solid. Still, once this thing does its initial, like, surprise, it's a mimic, then I think everybody just kind of surrounds and kills it pretty quickly. The mummy one I'm looking forward to. I really need to not have a mummy token there, because that's going to give away what's happening in this room, which is it's like in fact, it might be better. Why is it a mummy? Why not like a Demos Magen? Why wouldn't it be one of those? It's supposed to be in Ethern's library, right? I think on how you went to roll in Celeste's Stillness of Mind ability. Does that just let her void that effect? Your action and one effect on yourself that is causing you to be charmed or frightened. Yeah. I'd say she could just use her action to end it for sure. Probably up to the player to remember it, but if I think about it or somebody else thinks about it, then I think you could use that. What was... Okay, that was a spinning mimic. 34. Oh yeah, I was gonna put raw shardle in there because there was some debris. I guess I could put... Why? Can I just search debris and I can come up with something? Something that looks vaguely like a pile of stuff? Probably not. That's okay. Actually, I can rubble. Rubble would probably be a better thing. Nobody uses debris anymore. There we go. Well, that's like minerals. Just metal stuff. There we go. Like rocks looking shit. That's all I need. Work. Let Edmund roll to see if he finds any raw shardlin in there. That's been... I've kind of inadvertently stumbled upon a fun way of giving the players like soft loot, which I think a lot of video games do a really good job of. Which would be like if your game has a crafting system, you know, then you don't give the person the healing potion. Instead, you give them the healing herbs, and then, you know, they can craft from there. So it's kind of a multi-step. So it's like good loot, but it's not like, you know, super amazing loot. That's the kind of good balance, I think. D&D could use a more interesting crafting system. I still need to dive into what was that Kickstarter? They finally delivered like a couple months ago, and I need to dive into it. There was a cool like Monster Hunter inspired 5e book that I actually backed on Kickstarter, which is pretty rare for me to do. And it looked just... it had gorgeous art and had cool monsters, and it was very Monster Hunter-y, where it's like you go on an expedition, you know, and the whole adventure is about hunting this monster, but it's got like, you know, things you can learn, and there's a whole exploration part beforehand, and it's just the monster attacks in like waves and has stages, and just really cool like boss fight mechanic stuff. And then on top of that, the monsters drop certain different kinds of loot that you can then craft, also very much Monster Hunter, into very cool custom magic items. So I thought it was a really neat... I think it was called Heliana's Monster Hunting Guide or something like that. Somebody in here should know about it, but it's seemed really good. I just haven't had a chance to flip through it right now. It's a lot of stuff on my plate, as always. So it's like accounting the air mimic. Oh yeah, this was the one I was going to look at, which is 33. Mummy dressed in tattered black robes wearing a golden face mask is trapped in the western walls. No way to free itself from the ice. See, I think I need to not even use a token here and just have it be like a map art. And then the surprise will be if they try to get the mask and be like, oh, there's something, you know, fucked up about that. But it says, if the wall is reduced to 0 hit points, the mummy is released and makes its way to area H39, and from there to the library in Ethrin. Let's look at the library from Ethrin then, because I want to know what the fuck this thing is doing here. Line 9. Really excited to get to Ethrin. It's got a lot of potential. I think as written, it's largely disappointing, but I like the idea behind it, which, you know, story of Rime of the Frostmaiden right there. And of course, I'm gonna use the shit out of Dan Kahn's Expanded Towers of Magic, which I'm actually working on doing the official Roll20 conversion of. So I'm gonna be knee deep in all that information, which is really great timing for me. It just randomly ended up working out that I'll be able to get all that, plug myself into that, and refamiliarize and put all that into Roll20, and then by the time it's ready, I'll be be pretty much ready to go to Aetherin ourselves, I think. That's right, library has the Arcanoloth in there. Some weird, like, RP opportunities in this city. It's got a weird fucking penguin with him. Say anything about this random ass mummy? Written by Thurfirst, one of the few mages who survived Aetherin's crash. Often this guy attempts in the attempts of its doomed survivors to escape. I wonder if that's supposed to be mummy? I don't know. Scribbenscry. Is that the Arcanoloth's name? Scribbens? Yeah, Scribbenscry. Yeah, and then this weird ass penguin named Kingsport. I don't know if I get it. A blind albino giant penguin under the effect of an awaken spell. Lives in fear of his cruel, unpredictable master. Blind penguin hopes to be free of the Arcanoloth one day. It's a little weird for me, but my players do kind of like weird. Certainly looks like somebody be hanging around in a library, but fortunately, Arcanoloth is by itself not going to be a huge foe to fight. Ooh, Finger of Death could be fun though. Huh. Don't expect that one. Alright, but nothing about this random mummy that works in the library, apparently. Man, that's such a... Okay, mummy was created by Netherese priest to serve as a lore keeper in Aetherin. But why? There's nothing else about mummies in Aetherin. Like, they use... Like, I don't see them using undead. They use those Deimos Magian things. Right? That's like their whole thing is they created these mortal servants known as Magian, tirelessly perform their duties or wait in silence for new orders. But wouldn't it make more sense to put one of them here? These are magical human-like beings created by a wizard spell. And that would be more exotic, I feel like, also. They are constructs. Blood is seen to have the color and consistency of mercury. They exist purely through magical means. When one is killed, his body disappears in a burst of harmless fire and a cloud of smoke that quickly dissipates. Or he might be the only one I've seen that won't try to adopt him. Yeah, they're really not one for that kind of thing. I think I've thrown some of those kind of creatures and scenarios at my players before, and they rarely jump on it. I feel like Ballista was a very rare one that got added in that, but that was also because they could specifically give her like a certain task of like taking care of the wagon, and not like she's, you know, along and they take care of her or anything like that. They're not very nurturing players, I guess. Player characters. For a all magical construct, I was very disappointed. That's like, oh, they're just like beefy dudes with swords and crossbows. Like, that's lame. Like, you've got these ancient magical construct creatures that I imagine acting like creepy, like, I don't know, Tron guards or something. And they just carry swords and crossbows? Like, we can't do something cooler than that? Certainly we can at least reflavor it. I can't believe that was like the most exotic thing they could come up with. Thousands of years old, this cool like magical technology, and they're just like kind of teal people, I guess. Put them in armor. I mean, the disintegrating thing is cool. I almost wish it did something cooler when they die, but maybe that's just because I'm reading a crap load of Dragonlance, and reminding myself how fun it is that all of the main shock troopers, which are the Draconians, all have cool effects that happen when they die, which is glorious. That's true. There are different kinds of Magian. There's at least one that's a spellcaster. They have their own section. The Galvan Magian. Am I pronouncing that right, by the way? I assume it was Magian. Which has Shocking touch, cantrip, and a static discharge. Kind of a lower powered lightning bolt it can do on a recharge. And then the Hypnos Magen. Which just has at will suggestion. Wow. That could be fun, although DC 12 is not very good. CR1. Psychic Clash. Yeah, so you want to combine those for sure. I don't think +0 is correct. So, I mean, I just think it'd be a good opportunity to foreshadow and tease some of the stuff they find in Ithrin versus a random ass mummy. They're a city of mages, some of which are necromancers. Yeah. A talking fox, right? Yeah, and they hated that fox, right? They fucking hated that fox. They still talk about how much they hate that fox. Although the whole thing is that they want this mask in this room, so why this thing is wearing a golden mask, I don't know. Purely that's the reason they would free this creature. So a random Magen wouldn't have anything that they would care about necessarily. I just think the mummy's just a weird thing to put in here. Presumably the mummy would defend itself. It says the character ignores unless they interfere with it, in which case I guess it would then attack them. We could always randomly use a higher powered mummy if we wanted to. There's like a mummy lord, but that's probably too much. Either way, I'm not going to put the mummy token on there. I'll just describe it in this wall. In fact, we're going to do that. Make the wall further back. That would be like that. I don't have to put the token on the map then. Yeah, there we go. See it from there, and they're going to see a little trap. I can just describe a trapped figure on the other side of this wall, essentially. They want to free it, they can, and then this tattered robed figure comes stumbling out, and they can try to talk to anything, and it wouldn't respond. I could put the mask on the Magen, but I'm trying to figure out why it would have. I guess they could just dress him up, and it could still be a lore Magen. Maybe use the Hypnos one or something for that. I just think the Magen are more interesting. Like, why use a mummy? Whisper rolls. Never whisper rolls. Which one is the more interesting one to use, though? Probably Hypnos. That would work in a library. And you could cast suggestion on people and be like, shh. That'd be pretty creepy, actually. Like, it's like suggestion is just you making like the shush sound, and then it's like you can't talk for like a while. Remind myself how suggestion works. I think you do have to do the course of action for 8 hours concentration, though. But couldn't you just say you need to be quiet for the next 8 hours? And I could flavor it as a DM. I could just literally do the shush thing, and then the person can't speak, and everybody's like, what's going on? What's happening? And then they could lash out and attack this thing, in which case they would probably kill it pretty quickly, but still be, a little freaked out by it. Man, fuck that library ghost. That library ghost is the reason I didn't watch Ghostbusters as a young kid, because fucking, I will rant about this now. Ghostbusters is not a horror movie at all, and yet that opening scene with the library ghost is legitimately freaky, especially as a child, as a young child. And I wasn't a child. I was born when, let's make one thing for sure. I didn't see Ghostbusters in theaters. I was born when Ghostbusters came out. I'm not that old. But I did try to watch it when I was a kid, when it was on TV, and a friend of mine was like, you gotta watch Ghostbusters. And I could not. I was like, nope. Like that was so freaky. I was like, I'm not watching that. That's fucked up. And I didn't watch Ghostbusters for like years afterwards because of that, and it annoys me to this day because you go back and watch it and you're like, yeah, this scene is just stupidly like scarier than the whole rest of the movie, and it prevented my sweet innocent ass from watching that movie. And yet I was all about watching like Terminator 2, and like I could watch like the more actiony stuff, but just that whole opening thing was just so like horror. I was like, no. Yes, it's scary. It is a straight up jump scare. Like it's a horror jump scare. They're like creeping up on this ghost, and she turns and has that really freaky thing. And they're like, ah. And I was like, no, it's a horror movie. I don't like it. I don't want to watch this movie. And the annoying thing is that's not what that movie is at all. It's so annoying. And I know a lot of people are very dear and love Ghostbusters, and of course I obviously acknowledge the fact that it's a classic, but that particular scene just irks me to no end because it is tonally does not fit that movie at all. I have more nostalgia for other movies of the era, not necessarily that one. So I do still like. I did finally watch the Ghostbusters Afterlife like a month or two ago, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was pretty good. It kind of did the Star Wars Force Awakens thing, where it's like, hey, we're basically just gonna rehash the original movie that you guys love, but like Force Awakens, it's fine. Also, it does a fine job of doing that while still telling its own story. Now, I'm not gonna go down a rabbit hole of talking about the other Star Wars sequels, but I thought Ghostbusters Afterlife is a fine movie, is well casted, does a cool job of acknowledging the original films and building off them, and then still kind of doing its own thing while obviously very much just being a rehash plot wise, for sure. But I would highly recommend Ghostbusters Afterlife as being a worthy, watchable movie for sure. Yeah, no hate here for sure. I mean, they invented PG-13 in the 80s because shit was getting too crazy. It's like, I think, wasn't it Gremlin? It was Gremlins, and I think Indiana Jones Temple of Doom that caused the MPAA to be like, there's got to be something between, like, these aren't technically R-rated, but they're not PG either. Like, they had to invent PG-13 in the mid 80s because of that. I think we've already talked about the Druid area, or not the Druid, the... Does it have dynamic lighting down here? Okay, it does. The Dryad Grove. Yeah, I think it was Gremlins and Temple of Doom together. I believe also all of them might have released in 84, is that right? I think Ghostbusters is technically PG as well. 6, Frozen Grove, Dryad named Hathawin. We call her Hawthorne. Hathawin. Anna Hathaway? I can't imagine the vampires are going to survive that long. Oh yeah, there was the thing about the purple pears they can eat and get buffs, which are fine, I guess. I think the fun thing is you don't know what you're gonna get, but you just get like a free spell you can cast. Some of them are dumb, some of them are cool. I like that. I'm actually probably gonna keep that as written. But what I won't do is just have a bunch of Nothics hanging out down here. I think I'll have them. That's right. I think somebody suggested we put an Allop down here as part of the attack. Because the Nothics are supposed to be like the transformed wizards, which I guess mean Nothics are near immortal because this fucking city crashed 2,000 years ago. So anything that survives in this city has to either be undead or some kind of Futurama head in a jar situation. You know, there's normal creatures. They have reasonable lifespans. I guess apparently Nothics don't follow that logic though. I mean, these things had to be literally like 2,000 years old. They are. It's a curse. Oh yeah, maybe. It'd be decent shock troopers though. They've got basic melee attacks and range attacks, and I like the idea of the wizard, these survivors, kind of all being transformed into these creatures, and I really want to turn Ether into this very dangerous, like freaky, dark city that's like got these, roaming bands of monsters, but then there's like, sentient creatures still doing their things almost. Some of them because there's so much magic and danger there, and others because they're just like insane. But I think I'm going to have them attack during the Dryad encounter. And then maybe she could be mentioning the fact that range one-end creatures looking to the south. They follow the Dark Elves up. Yeah, she can mention the Dark Elves to the west, which the only... Or I drop the whole Dark Elf thing. Which I'm considering just because there's a lot going on in this cave, and I'm assuming to where my players are now, the last thing they're going to do is go to the lower left corner. Do the whole Dark Elf thing. Which is kind of too bad because there's, interesting stuff you can do with the Dark Elves, but there's enough going on here that we might not need it. Which means I may even go as far as to block off the entire lower left. That feels like a little extreme, though. I think I would just tell the players, and then let's give them the option to see how much they want to explore and do. They're not, unlike a lot of adventures, they're really not necessarily under a time crunch. Although in my games, you're never really under a time crunch anyway. All the drow be dead, yeah. That would have been more interesting to do if the drow and vampires weren't on opposite ends of the dungeon, though. To me, what I was going to do is have the drow be having attacked and barely survived, getting past the Remorazes. But since my players didn't go to the middle, they basically haven't seen hide nor hair of the drow at all. So I figured the drow, they came up in the western part of the map, and then they only went south from there to these ruins where they established an outpost, and then they went east, and then they actually found Etherin from there. So they didn't explore the other half of the map in my approximation. And the Remorazes were dangerous enough, and then just once they found the path to Etherin, they didn't need to explore these caves any longer, I think. I wonder what they would have done with the Dryad, though. Maybe she just mentioned that they come by and pluck the hairs. Hasn't spoken to them out of fear that they might harm her. Okay, so she's not naive. But yeah, she comes out and speaks to the players. The centuries of isolation have made her lonely, and the Dryad hungers for conversation and companionship, and yet hasn't spoken to the drow out of fear they might harm her. Does she know what drow are, then? Is she racist? Racism is stronger than her need for conversation and companionship? I think a more entertaining thing would be that she did try to make friends with them, and maybe she's more... because she is desperate for companionship, and maybe they rebuffed her and even like threatened her, and she was forced to retreat into the trees. And I like the idea that maybe she can even pull on some treant magic or something and maybe animate the trees a little bit. Not all drow, Jason. Hashtag not all drow. Would it be more appropriate to say that Lolth worshippers are all super evil? There's your problem. Worshipping dark gods. That's the problem with the orcs, too. Maybe not all orcs, but Grumpsh is not good. So you can kind of start making generalizations when you start worshipping literal embodiments of evil. And that's where you get drow with a bad rap. Fortunately, that appears to be their dominant religion. Four Nothics, evil denizens of Ithrin, followed Easelbeck and his fellow drow as far as the Dryad's Grove. How far did the drow make it into the city? Does it ever talk about that? I don't know if it did. I might have to actually look at the drow section itself. All of D&D alignment time. I think we've had that discussion before. Drow light or drow name only. Which, funny enough, does make the dino the dino acronym, which I do like. Drow. Amazing. Easelbeck. Plans to launch a full-blown expedition into the ruins of Ithrin, which he and his fellow drow discovered a few weeks ago. The drow entered the Scales of Hunger. Doesn't really say how far he... Maybe he hasn't actually made it in there. They just kind of found it. They never got to the city, yeah. They're not as hungry. They're more prudent, I guess, in their exploration. They actually do follow the rules of, hey, if you find something, don't touch it. Don't creep in there. Don't set off any ancient, sealed away dark gods or anything. Just come back and tell the rest of the, tell your boss, and we'll run it up the ladder and decide if that's something that needs to be looked at. And Quebec is excellent cog in the machine, I guess. Yeah, that's all it says. Okay, so they just made it as far as. So the main thing is the druid. I can't want to call her a druid. A dryad can tell the party, hey, there are drow here that made it up from the under. Or well, I guess she doesn't know that. Just there are mean. I kind of like role playing her as a very naive. I mean, she was a 2,000 years old, so I guess naive maybe not the right word for it, but clearly like a displaced time traveler at that point, right? Like, well, I guess drow might have existed 2,000 years ago. I don't know my fucking lore. It's so weird to have a fantasy world that doesn't like progress technologically, but I guess that's what happens when you have giant cataclysms and apocalypses and huge things happen every once in a while. But I like the idea of role playing her as being not very knowledgeable about any modern stuff going on, because I think she is supposed to be from Ithrin. She was enchanted by Netherese arcanists, endure high attitude. They can withstand the harshest of insults. Your high altitude and harsh weather. It's essential that grove survival is a dryad. Helping to keep them alive. So clearly maybe a product of Ithrin mage creation. Maybe she was even like a biologically engineered dryad or something to that effect. In which case she might be a wealth of information about Ithrin. The problem is she hasn't been there. She feels like she can't leave her grove behind, which she wouldn't want to, very far. There's enemies abound. She's familiar with the vampire. The vampire's made his way through here, but she's been able to repel the and I like the idea maybe she does have some kind of defense she can use with her trees. I'm gonna have to use some DM magic for that. What do dryads have as a baseline? Can charm people. You would definitely try to do. Free stride. Step into a tree. Can cast Barkskin, Pass Without Trace, Shillelagh, or Shillelaghs. That's what my players like to say it. Entangle. Goodberry. Rides are not very powerful. Rarely used as an enemy stat block, I find. Kind of creatures. This will probably be the same case. You know, I think I even like the idea of originally having them role play with a tree, having like the tree bend down and animate before the actual dryad steps out too. I don't think my players have really interacted with dryads very much. Tree's magic binds the dryad to the grove and keeps the trees alive. Yeah. Berries hanging from the trees are magically delicious. Indeed. But she will warn them, don't eat more than one. Once a day. They can come up with like a rhyme. Air a day keeps the mage hunters away. I don't know, what did the Ethrin even fear? Dark elves coming and going. But yeah, so and then they were mean to her. I just like her idea of saying like not even like they're pale, uh pointy eared folks that are the first I've seen in a while. She wouldn't have a very good concept of time. That did come through, and she was eager to meet them and talk with them, but they were very mean to her, and they stole a lot of her fruit. And maybe she can say like I had to shush them away or something, which is her like animating her trees to bash them away, because otherwise, how are they still here? Clearly, some monsters would have done something bad. But then maybe they walked into the city, but maybe they ran away, being chased by these terrible creatures. And the one thing she's not gonna be very good on is time. She's not gonna have a good concept of time. But then maybe during that fight, to punctuate that, I can have those same creatures down here. Forget what the Aleph was doing. It's helping drive them mad. One pair, but take no more, lest in greed you make your tummy sore. That's pretty good. I gotcha. Pretty good. I feel like that's a. It feels like appropriate thing for a dry to be kind of creepy teasing when it comes to, hey, do you want this forbidden, literally forbidden fruit? Almost tempted to give the Nothics the Allop ability. Wouldn't that be interesting? Whispers of Compulsion. It's a good ability. Because I like the idea of using the Nothics more than too many undead in Ethrin. I think there are some. Obviously, Orlothus is supposed to be a Demi-Lich, but we're not going Demi-Lich. I'm going to use more biological horrors like the Nothics. And just give them the Allop ability of Whisper of Compulsion. It's up to 3 creatures you can see within 60 feet of it. Each target must succeed entity. Or I could give each one a single target version of that. Like instead of its weird insight, it can target somebody, and maybe it does a single target version. Because nobody's using this in the middle of combat. The Nothic targets one creature you can see within 30 feet. Can test its charisma deception check against the Nothic's insight check. If the Nothic wins, it magically learns one fact or secret about the target. Not exactly something it's going to use middle of combat, if we're being frank. Good for RP opportunities and scary moments, but when we're down there for actual, because at this point I'm kind of using these as a shock trooper minion type creatures. Just the Alec, because it would be what drove them mad. I think they're just kind of mad. Love this picture, by the way. Doesn't it say they were just transformed there, like driven insane? Where is my tab? Mages who survived. Oh, it's right, because the arcane blight become Nothics, and there's a whole rule for that. Holy shit, I forgot about that. Mages who survived Ethan's 12 succumb to the arcane blight became Nothics. That speak Loros instead of Undercommon. I imagine you'd have gone insane by now, like for thousands of years. Any humanoid that spends 12 hours in the necropolis, which basically a long rest, must succeed a DC 15 con save, which is not necessarily easy. That's our lingering injury save, by the way, or contract an arcane blight. Magical disease transforms a humanoid into a Nothic, but only after the victim experiences hallucinations and feelings of isolation and paranoia. Going crazy. Player character with arcane blight against falling trait. I don't trust any trait. Flaw. I don't trust anyone. The flaw precedes any conflicting flaws fed by delusions. They're difficult for the character to distinguish from reality. Allies are conspiring to steal the victim's riches or otherwise turn against the victim. You're turning into Gollum, basically. It's Gollum. Whenever it finishes a long rest, an infected humanoid must repeat the saving throw on a successful save. The DC for future saves against Arcane Blight drops by 1d6. Saving throw DC drops to 0. The creature overcomes the Arcane Blight and becomes immune to the effect for further exposure. That's a really interesting rule. I've never seen that before. On a successful save, the DC for future saves drops by 1d6. So first you have to fail on a DC 15 con save to get Arcane Blight, in which case it's kind of all RP stuff. You just kind of end up going a little bit more Gollum, a little paranoid, a little crazy. And then every time you long rest, which shouldn't be too often in Aetherin, hopefully, you make the save again, and if you succeed, you still have it, as far as I am aware, you still have that RP flaw. And then the only way to get rid of it is by making that successful save several times over, but each time you make it, the save drops by 1d6, which means it could only drop by 1. So next time you have to make a DC 14 save, and then make a DC 12 save. You have to make all those saves. A creature that fails 3 of these saving throws, 3 just ever, transforms into a Nothic under the DM's control. That's crazy. I feel like you have to telegraph that somehow in the course of the dungeon in Aetherin somehow. I don't know how, but somehow reveal that these creatures were once some of the wizards, and that the effect is still happening now. Anybody in there can be affected by it. Greater Restoration spell or Summoning Magic ends the infection on the target, moving the flaw on all other symptoms, but the magic doesn't protect the target against further exposure. That's wild. So that's your time limit. Once you enter Aetherin, you do have to spend 12 hours before you have to even make the first save. So you spend your first day of adventure in Aetherin without any of those effects. Then I would probably rule after your first long rest, you would have to, everybody has to make a DC 15 con save, and then the people who fail start getting that feeling of a magical disease. It says it's a magical disease. Does that mean, I mean, it does say Greater Restoration, so I guess it follows the disease rules where you can cure it. Don't I have a player or two can just be immune to disease or something? Didn't I turn, was it Theron into like half goat or something into Annihilation? I'm trying to remember if there were similar transformations. This is a lot different because turning into a Nothic's pretty fucked up. It's just like, give me your character sheet. But that means you would have to, at most, spend like 4 days in Aetherin, I think, and fail every single saving throw, because the first time you fail, you then become the paranoid. Well, I guess if you fail the next 2, then you're Nothic. So if you spent 3 long rests in Aetherin and failed all 3 of the saves, you're fucked. That's interesting. You would definitely have to telegraph that, I think, physically as well as emotionally and psychically. So the player has an idea of like, oh shit, this is not good. Talk about what a good use of things like, what's the one that Edmund has? Yeah, something genius. Flash of genius. Right, because that's a big save. If you can just be like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and add my intelligence modifier to this save, that's a big freaking deal. Same with Bardic Inspiration, you could do, although they wouldn't be prepared. And because it's coming off of a long rest, that could be really tricky to set up because none of those things, the Flash of Genius you can use as a reaction, but Bardic Inspiration, I don't know how long that would last. You'd have to set that up early. Clammy gray skin. Yeah, it does mention some physical stuff. Clammy skin, hair loss, and myopia, which is nearsightedness. Could even like describe like your eyes are a little closer together or something. You know, like really creep it up to where the players are like, wait a minute. What the fuck is happening here? What do we think about giving the Alep ability to the Nothic, though, and maybe make them a little bit more creepier and stronger? And it will just keep their, like, basic multi-attack claws. They've got their gaze still. They can make a DC 12 con save or take 3d6 necrotic damage. But I like Whispers of Compulsion. We could just give them... Just make these, like, custom Nothics. Can't use those things on those checks from a mean DM, apparently. As long as you admit it. No, I don't know. That, I mean, I could see shutting that down too. And it is a magical disease. I don't even know how it's being, you know, how that it's affecting everybody. It just seems to be in that area. What if we call it Whisper of Paranoia? Yes, I'm copying and pasting. This is what you do to make creatures. Say Nothic uses, I think, one creature. One creature can see within 60 feet of it. Target must succeed on a DC 14 Wiz save. We could lower that to 12. We could still have it be a pretty low DC. Or it takes 2d8 plus 3 psychic damage. I'm tempted to keep the damage the same. That makes sense. Psychic damage. And must use its reaction to make a melee weapon attack against one creature. Nothic's choice that the Nothic can see. I like it. And I lowered the save, so it's still pretty low. It just that part's in keeping with its CR. I did not, but I mean its other ability has 3d6. That's very similar damage. Just a con save versus a wisdom save, but that one has the added effect of use up your reaction, and you have to use that to make a melee weapon attack against another creature. So there you go. I've made some custom Nothics. A little bit more exciting. So we can just, I think we'll just get rid of the Alep, and we'll just have the Nothics. Were there originally 4 in here? Because we could make it more. Definitely need to up numbers of monsters. Yeah, 4 Nothics. So let's at least have as many Nothics as party members. Let's do 5 Nothics. Would copy and paste it, but I think I already rolled hit points for all of them, and for some reason the thing I use not roll. Copy another rolled. Now we can click it. And I can have them come rushing in there and then maybe a surprise round. I don't know. I don't think they describe this cave at all, other than the fact that it's just a bunch of Nothics chilling here. Weird insights. Weirdly, they're not crazy and hostile, though, as written here. Qualities of this village drow, as far as the dryas grow, finding refuge in this cave. Now these use a weird insight to glean secrets from the characters. Reluctant to provoke a well-armed group of adventurers. Exact opposite of what I was going to do, which is have them provoke a well-armed group of adventurers. Trying to pick off lone prey. Well, aren't we all? But players are rarely splitting up. Food and drink to the Nothics loosens their tongues. See, I don't like any of this. I don't want the Nothics to be this like, hey, let's go chill around the campfire together. I want that to be creepy. Lost you mean it is garbled with a bit of nonsense. Yeah, I hate all of that. You just make all of that information that the Dryad knows. But I will probably hide the whole Erolithus thing. The Mythalar might be an important thing to mention. Don't know if I'm actually going to do the Spindle. I'm probably actually 1,000 years. I may actually ignore the whole Spindle thing, because in my campaign it was Auril herself, who was a mage, one of the high-ranking mages of Ithrin, who she just summoned all the Mythalar's power into herself and achieved an apotheosis, becoming the Frostmaiden. And unfortunately, that of course doomed Ithrin, sucked up all the power and caused it to crash. It's history. Form a ritual to enter Central Spire. Yeah, that's information I need to give the players as soon as I can, which is the whole point of Ithrin once you get there. To get to the Mythalar, which was kind of their mission they got from the Frostmaiden, which is, hey, there's, this thing is like on and it's very dangerous, it's sputtering, it's like a, going into a nuclear power facility, and like, it's radioactive, which is the arcane blight, and then there's this core you have to disarm. That's kind of the motif I was trying to go with for Ithrin, except there's also mutated monsters running around everywhere, because the sputtering Mythalar has like ripped open a portal into the Far Realm or something, and crazy shit's going on. But in order to get to that central access core, which is the Mythalar, you have to get the codes to get into the security door. I got followed on my mind for some reason. And a line of each of those codes, which is the Rite of the Octad, is in each of the towers. So essentially it works exactly the same as Omu's Lost Shrines, where you had to go to the shrines, get the little stone things, and then you plug those into the door to open the final dungeon. In this case, instead of little stone things, it's just a sentence that tells you what you have to do that you learn, and then you combine all 8 of those sentences, and that gives you the code you need to get to the final area. So very similar to Omu, which I knew going into it, but you know what? I also really liked Omu, and I liked how that worked, so I'm thinking gonna be the same thing here pretty much. I do believe that will do it for this Monday edition of Crafting Icewind Dale. I think by the time we get to Thursday, we'll pretty much be maybe just talking about Ithrin, even though we're going to be in the Caves of Hunger for a while. I think I'm just going to be able to prep Ithrin and get ahead of things. Obviously, when things change in Caves of Hunger, I can be responding to that and still talking about that, but I really feel like we're going to be able to get ahead of things pretty well here, because Caves of Hunger will take the players a while, but will not take me a while to prep it, if that makes sense. A lot of these kind of big combat and little exploration things will eat up some time. All right, that will do it for the Crafting Icewind Dale. If you enjoy the content, please do check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, William, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Role Player, Roll, Christopher, Brian, William, David, Corey, Koa1337, Matthew, Big Nut, John, Infernus, Chris, and Scott. And gold patrons: RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fasika, Tortoise, Scott, Refus, Carolyn, and William. Shout out to new patron William. Thank you all very much for your support. I will see you for more Crafting Icewind Dale on Thursday.